Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. There are zero spoilers for Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. We're going to talk about the finances of Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, the opening box office, which was $38.5 million on a $150 million film. That's a catastrophic box office opening. It's really bad, right? Why did it happen? 90% of the fault lies blame. 90% of the blame for this problem lies with the OSR allies. D&D Be Gone worked. The shout, taking the terror words of the 1983 Satanic Panic, American evangelical Christians, and echoing them, right, in 2023, bringing back 4 decades of terror and hatred, was incredibly effective. And the OSR allies were able to make the D&D movie, was able to reinforce every stereotype that the American public had for Dungeons and Dragons and keep them away from the film, even though it was a phenomenal film, and has literally 98% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is, so Paramount did its job, Hasbro did its job, every single actor did their job, and it wasn't enough to get over the OSR allies' vicious hatred of D&D, and the OSR allies' plan to destroy Dungeons and Dragons' future, to destroy 20 years of momentum for the Dungeons and Dragons' future was effective. But it's not all their fault. All right, so 90% of the blame of the failed D&D Honor Among Thieves movie goes to the successful D&D Be Gone campaign of the OSR allies. And I am proud of my content. I covered it for a month, and I would not shut up about D&D Be Gone because I didn't want people to forget, and it was effective. It was the most destructive force that has ever hit Dungeons. And I told you 2 months ago that the D&D, the 2023 Manic Panic, was far worse than 1983 Satanic Panic, right? And I'm telling you right now, billions have been lost because of the D&D Be Gone campaign, which was a call to boycott D&D Honor Among Thieves, despite all the people of color that were highlighted in the film, despite all the LGBTQ people who were in the film. Didn't matter to the OSR allies. They did not care, right? Like, they're just like, we're the parasite, we will kill the host. And that's exactly what they're trying to do right now, right? But they're 5%. I'm going to talk about 5% of the reason that this happened, because 5% of it does belong to the D&D community, okay? So we are responsible for 5% of this problem, and there is a real problem that we have. What is it? So first of all, the American people looked at this film and they're like, I'm not going to bother. I'm not going to see that, and so I'm not going to see a D&D movie. And they didn't think it was for them. Why? Right? Well, they do kind of have a good point. We, as Dungeons & Dragons community, we, for 20 years, for 8 years, have had the opportunity with the playtests, which Dungeons & Dragons pioneered the deep level playtest, incredibly responsive. The community says this, the designers do this, right? That was born on Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. It really never existed before. Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition with Monty Hook and Mike Merles was the most extensive example of we ask and we do, right? Based on what you say, right? The play tests. It's a big deal, right? And one of the things we've done is the D&D community we've directed the D&D designers to maintain a massive problem of Dungeons & Dragons. And we have to face it because it is 5% of the problem, okay? And what is that issue? Well, here we go. All right, here's the issue. Listen carefully. Dungeons & Dragons is an activity for the intellectual elite. It is built, maintained, distributed to the most charismatic, confident, intelligent people in the world. And we've done nothing to make it accessible to the intellectual commoner, right? Gary, in my humble opinion, built it as the most powerful secular bridge that any human has to explore identity, narrative, and language, right? there was a point where there's always been a point where we could have the biggest thing we could have done, and I called for it years ago. I was like, Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition. Years ago I said Dungeons & Dragons 6th edition should be 99 pages for the DMG, the PHB, and the Monster Manual, out of a desire to make Dungeons & Dragons accessible to the intellectual commoner. But right now, we can no longer pretend. We have built this bed, right? What is that bed that we lie in? It's 8,000 pages of canon in D&D 5e alone, right? If you're going to be I have 42 canon hardbacks on my shelf, right? Like, that's what it takes to be a dungeon master today, right? It's astounding, right? Like, and the idea that anyone but an intellectual elite is going to read 8,000 pages of content to be the best possible dungeon master they can, it's completely inaccessible to intellectual commoners. And that's on us. It's our responsibility. We created this mess, right? We own 5% of the blame for why the D&D Honor Among Thieves movie failed. And we have to, and the reason why is we have always demanded that this game be for the intellectual elites. And we have never made it accessible to intellectual commoners. And that's a travesty. And we own that, right? And we're not going to progress and fix this problem until we own it and do something to fix it. Every single word of that is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.